Chapter 366, Waiting for the Ambush. The shore of Thousand Waves Lake mostly had amphibians as monsters crawling around. Thousand Creations was currently hunting these monsters. Changing Springs group consisted of a total of 5 players, just like a standard dungeon party. They were hiding in a small forest along the shore. But no one rushed out after Thundering Light shouted, though. "Let's observe for a bit before we do anything," Changing Springs said. All 5 took his advice and crouched down together amongst the trees. Blue River looked around and saw a few brushes on his left rustle slightly, so he lifted his body a tiny bit in order to take a look. He saw a character ID floating up above the brushes and recognized it as one of Herb Garden's elite members. "Herb Garden's over there," Blue River said to the group. "Good. It seems like the other guild's players have arrived," Changing Springs said. "With such a large place, it doesn't seem like it's possible to do any large-scale preparations," Boundboat whispered. "Could they be in the water?" Thundering Light guessed. "They can't hide in there for very long," Changing Springs said. In Glory, all characters were born with the ability to swim. However, when they dive into the water, they would only be able to hold their breath for so long. If they continue to stay underwater after running out of air, they would eventually drown themselves. How long they could stay underwater depended on the character's stamina. However, no matter the case, it wasn't possible to stay underwater forever, so it would be very easy to tell whether or not there was an ambush waiting in the water. Thousand Waves Lake had numerous ripples along its body of water, but there were no signs of any heads popping out. "What do you think?" Changing Springs spoke in the channel. This was said in the team channel, where each party that was inside was from a different guild. Each guild had sent out around 5 players and all of them were amongst the top 100, highest level players in the 10th server. As for guilds without these high-level players, they weren't interested in participating in the interference of Guild Happy at this time. "We haven't found anything," Herb Garden replied. "Nothing here," Tyrannical Ambition followed. "Same. +1. +2. The several guilds were each at different positions, encircling Thousand Creation. Everyone was looking around for anything suspicious, but they didn't find anything. "Could Guild Happy not have made any arrangements?" someone said. "If it were me, this is a very bad spot to make any arrangements. What level are their guild members? If they were to come here, let alone be able to PK, the monsters alone would make it difficult for them," another player said. This was very logical. Thousand Waves Lake had level 40 to 43 monsters, while the majority of players in Guild Happy were still in level 30 range. Even with the newly added, higher-level players, they were still at an average of level 36 or 37. Weren't the only ones who could level here be their players? Aside from them, all other 10th server players would be underleveled here. "Seems like we were overly worried," Herb Garden's Arisema concluded. D*MNIT, Zhang Yu couldn't help but curse. If they had known that the other side hadn't made any preparations, they wouldn't have needed so many people. It was true that Thousand Creations was a top-tier player in the game, but the players that were here wouldn't lose to him. A small party was enough to accomplish this without any casualties, yet they had sent out tens of players to come. "Wait a moment," Changing Spring unexpectedly said. "Let's wait a bit longer. Our movements might have been too quick and perhaps Guild Happy hasn't finished their arrangements yet. We should wait a bit longer. We might be able to catch them in an ambush while they're arriving." Blue Brook Guild's Boundboat explained what Changing Spring meant. Everyone listened and felt that he was right. They weren't worried at all for Guild Happy's ambush. In fact, they were more afraid that the other side wouldn't ambush them. Right now, everyone was quiet. They were somewhat impatient, but if they waited and something big happened, their trip wouldn't have been in vain. As a result, everyone continued to stay silent for a while longer. Thousand Creations was no longer the focus anymore. Their focus was on their surroundings for any signs of movement. More importantly, they conveyed orders to the entire guild to pay attention to Guild Happy's movements. In particular, if they saw Lord Grim, Cleansing Mist, Soft Mist or any other elites from Guild Happy, they were to immediately report back. However, after half an hour, not a single report came back. "Alright, everything should be good now," Arisema said. Our opponent is still Yi Chu. If he noticed something wasn't right, he wouldn't be this slow, right? Zhang Yu said. Even though they didn't feel good about Yi Chu, they couldn't underestimate Yi Chu's ability. Yeah, Changing Spring had no choice but to agree. Only Blue River was startled. This was because he clearly knew that Yi Chu had predicted this would happen. But why did it seem like he hadn't made any preparations? He couldn't understand. In his eyes, without any good methods to counter them, he still could have had 1,000 creations go offline temporarily. There was nothing they could do about that. However, nothing was going as he had imagined it would go. He had warned Changing Spring previously, but Changing Spring had clearly regarded Blue River's warning as a type of analysis. Changing Spring didn't know that this warning had come directly from the target. Blue River didn't know what to do or say. If he explained himself, he would reveal his misdeeds and it would truly be quite awkward. But this time, they didn't give him any time to stay conflicted. Tyrannical ambitions. Zhang Yu had run out of patience long ago. Seeing that no one had any new suggestions, he immediately said, "Then what are we waiting for? Let's move. We've already wasted so much time for this little punk. Have those at the respawn point get ready." After sending out the messages, the guilds began to move. If it was only 1,000 creations as their opponent, there would be nothing they would need to worry about. They could kill him however they'd liked. The guild players came out from their hiding spots and rushed out. They didn't present themselves as powerful or shout anything out. For something as easy as this, there was no need for it. It would only make them look stupid. The long-range gunners began firing and Thousand Waves Lake's silence was broken. The monsters crawling around were immediately alarmed. They didn't need to be concerned about them, though. The only thing they needed to focus on was 1,000 creations, who reacted very quickly. Hearing the gunshots, he immediately ran and jumped into the lake. He really is 1,000 creations, Blue Brook Guild's players couldn't help but say after seeing 1,000 creations' quick reactions. Humph. Blue Brook Guild's Lunar Grace immediately humphed in disdain. She was a female player and was disgusted by 1,000 creations' bullying. She knew why the other Blue Brook Guild members commented with a hint of lament. It was because 1,000 creations' nasty hobby had trained him to be very alert. In the heavenly domain, there were quite a few players who wanted to kill him as soon as there was any sign of him, so he was very used to people coming to PK. In addition, because of his agreement with Blue Brook Guild, the guild wouldn't help him out of these types of situations, so he was used to dealing with this alone. There were times where he survived and there were times where he died. Though in the end, 1,000 creations had a lot of experience with this sort of situation. As soon as the offensive began, 1,000 creations didn't hesitate and immediately rushed into Thousand Waves Lake. He had clearly known that there weren't any ambushes waiting there. But the guild players weren't worried. Going down was just going down. Everyone could do it. They could just continue chasing. So what? They were all experienced experts, too. The guild leaders were all better than 1,000 creations, too, so there was nothing to be afraid of. Don't let him escape, Zhang Yu impatiently roared. He was still using the crowd lover elementalist and waved his staff as he chased. A frost ball shot out from his staff and chased after 1,000 creations. The other guild players also used their methods. Those who could attack, attacked, while those who had crowd control, used their crowd control. Those who had to close in to attack had to spring faster. Players rushed at him in many different directions. They predicted 1,000 creations' movements and made preparations for where he would go. Over there, Zhang Yu's frost ball hadn't connected, but he continued to chase, while directing others to attack. They were all experienced veterans. They didn't need to hear all the details. They only needed to know the timing. As soon as Zhang Yu's words came out, Tyrannical Ambition's 4 other players split paths. 2 players headed straight into the water, while the other 2 headed towards where 1,000 creations was predicted to go in order to cut him off. The other guilds had their own thoughts. In only a short moment, half of the players had already gone into the water. The originally rippling surface of Thousand Waves Lake began to spray out splashes, as the players ran into the lake like torpedoes with their target as 1,000 creations, who was swimming frantically. Long-range people, block him, Zhang Yu shouted. He was more direct and didn't care about the other guilds hearing. In any case, if there was something that he needed to do, he would order it. The long-range gunners didn't dive down in a hurry and instead fired at 1,000 creations. This was a maneuver that required experience. In the water, the characters would never be still and would be constantly bobbing up and down. In particular, with so many players jumping in, the waves were large and the bobbing would be more intense. In this situation, aiming accurately was very difficult. As a result, they stayed on shore, where the land was steady, and fired happily before doing anything. As if sensing the threat, 1,000 creations suddenly plunged downwards and his character dove into the water. The others looked and did the same. If not, then when 1,000 creations went down, they wouldn't be able to see where he would be going. Who knew that at this moment, a huge wave suddenly rose up along with a boom right after. The wave swept up one of the players high up into the air. Chapter 367, Waves. What's going on? Everyone was practically in the same area, which saved them some time because they wouldn't need to type out their messages in the team channel and instead could directly shout their words for everyone to hear. The instant the player was lifted into the air by the waves, the scene erupted into shouts, as if a pot had exploded. But no matter how many shouts there were, they wouldn't be able to cover up the rapid firing that followed after. Ta 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 ta, amidst the sounds of shooting were also the sounds of the waves surging forward. Countless bullets broke out from beneath the water, flying straight for the player who was tossed into the air. There are players beneath the water, someone shouted. 1,000 Waves Lake only had amphibious creatures and water beasts. It was impossible for them to have any gun abilities. Only players could have done it. No way, someone cried out in astonishment. They had been carefully observing their surroundings for about half an hour and they hadn't seen any signs of players underwater. But somebody suddenly appeared in the water and this person definitely wasn't 1,000 creations. How did he escape from everyone's eyes? This bound boat from Blue Brook Guild suddenly stuttered. Say it, Changing Spring continued to chase as he shouted. This seems like a type of rarely seen technique, Bound Boat said. What is it? I can't remember the name, but it was specially used for battles in the water. The character hid underwater and would come up for air from time to time, using the wave spray as a cover. When it first appeared, it was used for sneak attacks in underwater battles. But because it required users to be very close to the surface of the water, as long as one was careful, it would be extremely easy to see through it. The practicality of it was greatly weakened, so it slowly died out. Bound Boat said. I seem to remember something like that. Changing Spring was surprised. Even though the technique has died out, it's still a pro-level technique, Bound Boat said. So that's Lord Grimm, Changing Spring said darkly. During their discussion, the other players went underwater to find the reason why, when suddenly, they saw blood spray out as 3 players were sent out of the water. In underwater battles, many of the skills effects are different in water than they are on the ground. The players weren't able to tell what skills had been used to send those 3 players out of the water. But they were, at least, able to see what was lurking underwater. Lord Grimm. Cleansing Mist. The submerged players cursed in the team chat, F***CK. After receiving the information, all the others cursed as well, because the weight of these names were too heavy. Yi Chu, Su Mucheng. In the pro scene, they were considered to be the very best duo. Even though they had dozens of players, they still weren't confident in fighting these two. For a moment, the players who had been standing happily above the water stopped moving, as if they had agreed by chance. Against these two, they weren't sure whether they should fight or not. They hoped to receive clear orders from above. Splash! 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 After 3 consecutive splashes, another splash sounded as a 4th player was sent out of the water. In the water, there was also a quick recover move. However, the effects were different. It wasn't a roll on the surface of the water. All it did was stabilize the character and slowed the character's speed after hitting the water, so they weren't like a rock that would drop to the bottom of the body of water. Quick recovering on the ground was something these elite players were very adept at. However, in the water, there really weren't many of them who had gone through specialized training for it. All 4 players failed their quick recovers, one after the other. 4 splashes as the 4 shot towards the bottom of the lake. This effect was similar to that of getting knocked down onto the ground. Only after a while did the 4 finally stabilize themselves and began heading towards the surface of the water. But then they suddenly saw numerous bubbles float up and turn their heads only to see a laser beam shooting towards them. Su Mucheng's launcher had sent out a laser rifle. It was a game, so unless stated otherwise, any skill could be used in the water. It was just that the effects would be different because of the difference in the environment. Most of the skills simply had reduced speed in the water. However, the launcher's laser rifle didn't seem to have this reduction and was as fast as ever. The movements of the characters were slowed in the water, though, and they couldn't move as quickly when compared to the times they were on the ground. How could they dodge this attack? The light from the underwater laser rifle could even be seen by those above the surface of the lake. The refraction and reflection of the glowing light made the scene look like a light show. It looked even more impressive underwater than it was on the ground. These 4 players were blasted into Tangulu. They weren't dead, but the damage they took wasn't light. The 4 were already confused and disoriented, when suddenly a figure quickly swam to their sides and sent out a skill. The 4 could see the skill coming at them slowly and felt like they could dodge for sure. But they had forgotten that even though their opponent's skill moved slowly, their movements were slow as well. Their eyes and hands were quick, but their characters' movements lagged behind. The skill that they thought they could dodge with certainty, connected. What's going on over there? The players above the water didn't know what was going on. They just saw the 4 characters drop into the water, get hit by the laser rifle, and then saw the part of the water continuously surge, as if it were boiling. It looked like they were dumplings going into the pan. The laser rifle was the fire and the water was now boiling. Help! Just when they were still pondering over how these dumplings were being cooked, someone in the team chat suddenly asked for help. Honestly speaking, they didn't see clearly which individuals had been turned into dumplings. They only saw that the situation seemed off. There was no need to question it though. Even though their bosses hadn't told them whether or not to continue fighting, with players crying for help, how could they just sit idly and ignore them? The players in the water dove down and looked towards that direction. All they could see was that area of water had already become like a flood. They couldn't even see how many people were over there. They hastily swam over there, when suddenly, they saw a flash of white light. Everyone was startled. They looked at their team list and sure enough, one of them had left the team, meaning he had been killed. Hurry forward. With one now dead, everyone immediately understood the situation. As a result, this player began to urge them to hurry up. But during this time, white light continued to flash again and again amidst the storm of waves. Finally, the waves stopped and the lake water stilled. All that was left was a single character standing, Lord Grimm. The 4 died just like that? Everyone stared blankly. They were suddenly afraid of going up to fight. They had originally been going up to rescue them, but now that there was no one to rescue, if they went up now, wouldn't that just be asking to die? Everyone stopped and couldn't help but look around left and right. But after looking, they realized that they had around 30 players. Against one person, why had they been so scared? Thinking of this, everyone began to feel embarrassed. Even if the opponent was God Yi Chu, with so many of them, there really was no reason to be afraid. Some of them were still thinking, while some had already begun shouting in the team channel, there's only one person. It doesn't matter who it is. Everyone go forward. As soon as the message dropped, several players began to shoot forward. Yi Chu's Lord Grimm didn't wait there like an idiot, either. After killing 4 players, he was beginning to run out of air, so he immediately headed towards the surface. Stop him. Don't let him go up to the surface. Someone figured out what he was doing and immediately realized that Lord Grimm didn't have enough air. As long as they stopped him from going up to get air, they wouldn't even need to fight to win. They could just let him drown himself to death. 2 figures immediately appeared above Lord Grimm, blocking his path to air. These were 2 ninja classes. They used the shadow clone technique to instantly move to their location, in order to block him. Lord Grimm's hands extended out and threw a grenade. The explosion wasn't as large in the water, but the waves began to surge again and the two ninjas, along with Lord Grimm, were sent up above the water. It was just that while the two ninjas were blown up above the water, Lord Grimm had swam up to get air. Lord Grimm didn't stop to rest. Sending a spear to the left and a sword to the right, he attacked the two ninjas. Su Mucheng's cleansing mist seemed to have been waiting, bobbing up and down with a cannon on her shoulders. This sort of bobbing up and down wouldn't affect a pro player's accuracy, though, as the cannon shots caused the two ninjas to continue to roll up above the surface of the water. "Hello. Don't just stand there watching," Yi Shu suddenly shouted. On the surface of the water, a character's head stuck out, staring blankly at the scene. On his head was the name, Thousand Creations. "These are for you." Lord Grimm suddenly shot out his palm and one of the ninjas flew towards Thousand Creations. "Since you know how to bully little noobs for monsters, you can do harsher things, too, right?" Yi Shu said after sending Thousand Creations an opponent. His Lord Grimm suddenly jumped, though it wasn't very high because he was in the water. But with this, he was able to dodge the numerous attacks from below him. He then spread out his hands and tossed another hand grenade. F***CK. The players who had just gotten their heads out of the water saw the hand grenade dropping towards them and hastily tried to run, but how could they move so quickly in the water? Bang! Another wave lifted these bunch of players to the side. Splash, and Yi Shu's Lord Grimm ferociously shot back into the water. Chapter 368, Massacre by Drowning. Grenade was only a low-level Spitfire skill. Even though it dealt AoE damage, the damage it dealt was very low. However, it was still very effective for clearing the area because it had an extremely short cooldown. The explosion created by the grenade could be seen even more clearly in the water. In the water, the characters were pushed all around, up, down, left, right. The waves on the surface of the water turned over and the characters who were about to reach the surface were then pushed away by the shockwaves from the explosion. Afterwards, they heard the sound of someone entering the water over and over again and then, there was a sudden flash of cold light. Yi Shu used quick recover once he entered the water. He was in complete control of Lord Grimm's movements. As soon as he went under, he immediately drew his sword with a sword draw. The sword light slashed through the water, lifting a series of bubbles. The sword speed in the water couldn't compare with its speed on land, but against these characters underwater, there still wasn't a single one who could dodge it. Lord Grimm flipped his body and shot his palm downwards. Falling flower palms blow away effect was reduced in the water, but because it pushed the water, the palm's attack range was increased. Below, 5 players were pushed down towards the bottom of the lake. None of the troops that were sent to kill Thousand Creations were weak. They were all elites from the top guilds. Either through personal experience or through spectating others fighting Lord Grimm, they suddenly understood one thing: in the water, the difference between Lord Grimm and them was even larger. This was because the water was a special environment. In water, all the numbers and skill effects were different. These elites weren't too experienced in this area because there weren't many quests or dungeons in the game that had to be completed in the water. Even for the ones that did require it, it would only be a small portion. It was only against an NPC, too, so as long as they grasped the strategy for it, they were able to pass it easily. As a result, they didn't really have much experience in an actual underwater battle. Yi Shu was different, though. He had a background as a pro player, so he would have gone through specialized training for all sorts of situations. For water battles, pro matches had water maps that they could choose from. Some teams were even good at water battles and chose water maps in order to create an advantage for themselves. As a result, any pro player would have done their research and practiced for water battles. At the very least, they couldn't be like normal players and continue fighting in the water as if they were on land. As a result, compared to a top-tier pro, they were basically a bunch of noobs. Everyone immediately felt terrified, when suddenly, another sound resounded out. Countless waves stirred, dealing damage and sweeping them away. They turned around to look and saw that cleansing mist was underwater. The cannon shot that she fired had created a swirling whirlpool, sucking in the surrounding water. Only then did they realize that there wasn't only one person who saw them as noobs, but two. What do we do? Everyone already had their own thoughts on what to do in this situation, but they couldn't help but ask for instructions from their higher-ups. At this moment, the higher-ups were undoubtedly suffering the most. They were all experts, so they knew better than anyone else that the situation wasn't looking good. They hadn't thought that the opponents would use their advantage of experience in water battles. This was bullying. The guild leaders wanted to cry, but no tears came out. They had already lost 4 players. If they continued to fight, there would certainly be more deaths. Even more important was that even if they got an advantage, without any real experience in this area, if their opponents couldn't beat them, they would simply retreat. Could they stop them from running? No confidence. None of them had any confidence. The guild leaders quietly discussed this as the struggle in the water continued. The players terrifyingly discovered a fact. Up until now, Lord Grimm had taken the initiative to attack them. What did this mean? This meant that the opponent had absolutely no fear of them. Or perhaps their slight number advantage didn't mean anything to this god when they were in the water. The several players who attempted to fight with the god only made everyone feel embarrassed for them. Their attacks and skills were sent out as if they were blind, and it didn't appear as if Lord Grimm had any trouble dodging them. His attacks, on the other hand, connected wherever he wanted them to connect. Run away first. Run away first. One of the players didn't wait for their guild leader's orders and began making his own suggestion. Quite a few immediately followed it and began to retreat. It couldn't be said that they weren't trying. They had tried really hard. However, fighting in the water was way too different from fighting on the ground. On the ground, they could only move around in a circle that was around them. At most, they had the option to make some jumps. But in the water, there were just too many options that they could make. Surrounding someone required more troops and more planning. They weren't experts at this, so they didn't have any methods to deal with Lord Grimm. The other guy was swimming towards them while he was attacking. Every one of them that was in the water had taken damage. Ah! Someone suddenly cried out. Everyone then saw his "ah" word bubble on top of his head go towards the surface of the water, ignoring everything else. But very soon, an artillery shell exploded above his head as the waves surged. Not only did they stop him from moving up, they also pushed him down. This guy completely ignored the attack and, after stabilizing himself, he continued to charge towards the surface of the water. At this moment, the others stopped paying attention to him. But out of the corner of their eyes, just as he was about to hit the surface of the water, he suddenly stopped and began twitching mechanically. Startled, they suddenly understood what was going on. Drowning. This guy had used up all of his air and had ran out of health. This sort of twitching meant that it was already too late to save him. It was an animation that the character made right before dying to let you know what had happened. Sure enough, the twitching soon stopped. The character stopped moving and floated to the surface of the water. Not long after, a white light flashed and the player chose to revive at the city. The team had lost another member. This drowned victim could be considered as a warning to them. The complexion on half of them had turned pale white. They had been worrying about this and that and had forgotten about paying attention to their air. Those who had paid attention to it thought that this was an extremely basic task and that there was no way they'd forget about it, which was why they hadn't thought of reminding the others. The amount of air they had depended on the character's stamina, so everyone had a different amount and they couldn't use their own when comparing with other players. Only when one of their players drowned did half of them suddenly realize that they had made an extremely low-level mistake. These players immediately rushed towards the surface of the water as if it were a competition. However, at this moment, their opponents knew that they had forgotten about this and had a plan. Lord Grimm quickly appeared near them. He blew up grenades, sent out bombs, and captured them. In short, he used everything at his disposal in order to keep them underwater. If it was only the damage from these skills, the players wouldn't be concerned. However, Yi Shu was only using displacement skills. Since they were in the water, a knockback could be used in a downward direction, pushing them down further in the water. The players made threatening gestures, struggling, while crying out for help in the team channel. It wasn't that the others didn't want to save them, it was just they truly had no way to. They had no way of capturing Lord Grimm with his artful maneuvering. The shouts in the team channel grew more and more anxious. The guild leaders were also extremely worried. They personally went into the water to try and save them, but they weren't able to do much. In the water, their orders seemed to have hundreds of mistakes in them, so much so that they were starting to feel embarrassed about giving out orders. Not long after, another character began to twitch. He ran out of air and had no health left, so he drowned to death. Soon, characters began to react one after the other. It was Lord Grimm though that began to hurry towards the surface. Seeing this, they immediately understood that Lord Grimm wasn't able to hold on any longer, either. They immediately went to chase after him in order to drag him down with them. But at a crucial moment, Cleansing Mist fired an artillery shell at them. For launcher skills, as long as there was an explosion, the effects would be even more terrifying in the water than they were on land. The shell exploded behind Lord Grimm, sending the waves rolling. Lord Grimm was in the same party as her, so he wouldn't be affected by it. This was all a part of the game's rules. The others were different, though. They had no way of counteracting the pushing force of the waves. Because Lord Grimm had to go up for air, a few of the guild elites finally escaped. However, there were at least 10 corpses floating underwater. This low-level mistake had already created huge losses for the team. Scatter, changing Spring typed into the team channel. Who knew how long these players had been waiting for this command? They didn't care if the order didn't come from their guild's leader. They immediately rushed towards the shore. As they turned their heads to scatter, they discovered that Lord Grimm was still chasing after them. All of the players felt a cold chill. Sure enough, they had originally thought that they had taken the initiative, wondering whether there would be a battle. But from the looks of it now, could this even be called a battle? The players felt depressed in their hearts. But because of their numbers, Lord Grimm's group didn't have enough players to catch them all. Just as they were about to reach the shore, several players suddenly jumped out from their ambush spots in the forest. In the lead was a brawler. Seeing his level 30 equipment, they could tell that he was under-leveled and shouldn't be in this leveling area. However, after seeing his ID, their spirits immediately burned to ashes. Steamed Bun Invasion. This was one of Guild Happy's core experts. Ah! Over here! Hurry, hurry! There's so many of them, everyone heard Steamed Bun Invasion yell. So many. Is he talking about them? Chapter 369, Trapped. As soon as they saw Steamed Bun Invasion, the group of players swimming for their lives towards the shore immediately turned cold. It wasn't that Steamed Bun Invasion himself was scary, but rather that he had come at a crucial moment, indicating that their opponent had made preparations long beforehand. First, he had lured them into the water and then used the fact that these players weren't experienced in water battles to teach them a good lesson. They had finally struggled back to shore, when their opponents appeared onshore to set up an ambush. There weren't many of them, though, only 3. However, the problem was that they had enemies both on land and in the water. Everyone couldn't help but think of the phrase, to beat a drowning dog. Charge, even though there was an unforeseen obstacle in front of them, if they stayed in the water, they would only be killed off by Lord Grimm. At this moment, who knew how many of them yelled this out at the same time? The several players, who had already reached the shore, jumped ferociously in order to directly exit the water. While in the air, they suddenly heard 3 gunshots, which had come from the nearby grove. Obscured by the trees, the flash from an explosion could be seen and 3 artillery shells were sent flying over. Still in the air, they had nowhere to run to. They could only brandish their weapons and pray that they could chop down the artillery shells. In theory, this was possible, but apart from the pros, very few could actually accomplish it. Right now, they were controlling their movements in the air, but they also wanted to hit a high-speed artillery shell. These players simply didn't have the skill to do that. The 3 artillery shells connected with the several players that had shot out of the water, instantly exploding. The shockwaves from the blast sent the players flying. Several splashes could be heard. Of the 5 players who had jumped out, 4 had been sent directly back into the water. The 5th person jumped over the explosion. Just as he was feeling proud of himself, he hadn't yet landed when a brick hit him from the side. Following Steamed Bun Invasion, Soft Mist rushed forward and thrust forward with a double stab. A streak of blood flew through the air and this brother was also sent back into the water with a splash. The difference, though, was that after entering the water, a cloud of red could be seen floating on top of the water. Blood was pouring out. Tang Ru's double stab had hit in the same place twice, causing a bleed status. Steamed Bun Invasion. Soft Mist. These two were the brave generals in Lord Grimm's dungeon team. No one dared to look down on them. Who was that person shooting from the grove? They hadn't seen him clearly. However, Misty Castle's players were even more quiet than any other guild. This was because this person made them think of the player who had recently left their guild, Horse Shooter. There was still one more standing on the shoreside. No one recognized him, but in their eyes, the threat from this person was even greater than the other three. That was because this person was a summoner. He had already summoned a mob of creatures and had arranged them in a line along the shore, blocking their path from the shore. Were they not confident in beating the summoner? These experts wouldn't go that far, but the main point was that it would waste time. With the summoned creatures in the way, Steamed Bun Invasion and Soft Mist would have time to arrive and throw them back into the water. No. Another name from their team list faded away. Another had unexpectedly died in the water. The attentive ones immediately discovered that this player was one of the players that had been tossed back into the water. Lord Grimm and Cleansing Mist had caught him and he died very quickly. Behind them were pursuers, and in front of them was a blockade. These guild leaders had experienced many battles before. It wasn't as if they had never seen this scene before and instantly figured out what advantages would help them escape. Scatter, Changing Spring shouted. Everyone else immediately followed. No matter the case, they had the advantage in numbers. Happy's players were using few to surround many. Even though they had been successful, they couldn't cover the entire field. If they split up, some might die, but the majority of them would be able to escape. As a result, the players in the water acted instantly and began swimming either to the left or to the right. With enemies behind them and enemies in front of them, what other direction could they run in other than left or right? There was nothing Yi Shu could do about them splitting up, so he could only split his forces as well. Those in the water would chase after one side, while those on shore would block the other side, but his opponents split up again. No one pulled along any partners with them. It was every man for themselves and their forces became even more scattered. Tang Ru's group didn't go down into the water. They stayed on shore, chasing them. Even these experienced players from the top guilds were like noobs in the water. For players like Tang Ru and Steamed Bun Invasion, no matter how good their mechanics were, they would need practice before they could do anything in the water. They'd be even more newbie than the guild players. As for Concealed Light, he didn't need to be said. The line of summoned creatures on shore, now that was a bluff. In fact, the palms of his hands were drenched in sweat. They had been too cautious. If they had courageously charged at the summoner, they would have immediately known that these summoned creatures were basically the same as paper. Their controller's skill level was too poor. In the end, the blockades onshore wasn't able to block anything. The players in the water swam along the shore for a bit and then went on their own way. Some turned around to keep swimming. Some continued to swim along the shore. Others even swam into deeper waters. Tang Ru's group didn't know who to chase, when Tang Ru suddenly received a message from Yi Shu, chase after the ones who turned around. Okay. Tang Ru received the message and called out to everyone to immediately go back and chase after the ones who had turned around to run. As a result, those who hadn't turned around, waited for a chance to get back onto land. Tang Ru looked and wanted to turn around to kill them, but Yi Shu seemed to have guessed what was on her mind and messaged, ignore them, keep chasing. Why? Tang Ru was only controlling her soft mist to run along the shore, so she had the time to reply. Many players. Hard to fight. Yi Shu seemed to be busy, so he didn't say much. Tang Ru turned to look. There were already almost 10 players that had climbed onto the shore. Tang Ru knew that these were all experts. One-on-one wouldn't be a problem, but if there were so many of them, if they had a strategy as well, she didn't think that she could fight them. Understanding Yi Shu's intent, Tang Ru continued to chase after those who had turned back, along with Steamed Bun Invasion and Concealed Light. But these players' minds were quite clear. Seeing that there were players over there that had gotten onto land, they immediately turned around again, heading in the direction where others were getting out of the water, clearly to look for help. What do we do? Tang Ru was at a loss. She had the mechanics, but her ability to think was very far off. Keep chasing, Yi Shu replied. Tang Ru immediately told everyone else and then turned around, too. It hadn't been easy for those 10 or so players to get onto dry land. Seeing Soft Mist's group running towards them, they immediately began arranging their team. Even though they weren't at Yi Chu's or Su Mucheng's level, they didn't dare to look down on them. Last time, when they chased after Lord Grimm and the others, Soft Mist had slaughtered her way out of Kanji City by herself. They had heard of her might. Even though there hadn't been any elite experts there at that time, to be able to slaughter her away out of such a large mob, no one dared to say that they had the same level of mechanics and courage as her. Hurry, hurry. Heal, heal. The 10 or so players busily ran about in disorder. Some of them had taken damage in the water and were hurriedly urging the clerics to heal them. The aquatic battle had been so chaotic that, let alone coordination, the clerics had even forgotten to do even the most basic support. The clerics in the team were bustling around and white light swept down. Those who were still in the water gradually grew braver as they saw that they were getting closer to the shore. The 10 or so players finished arranging themselves. As a result, they moved forward instead of retreating, rushing towards Tang Ru's group. What now? Tang Ru asked Yi Shu. Kill, Yi Shu replied. What? Then why didn't you let me do that earlier? Tang Ru asked. Then, were you going to let those in the water run away? Yi Shu asked back. How evil, Tang Ru said. You don't like it? Yi Shu asked. It's exactly what I like, Tang Ru replied with a smiley face. Is it going to be a problem? Yi Shu asked. Perhaps. Maybe a little. In the All-Star weekend, Tang Ru had thoroughly witnessed the phrase, no matter how good you think you are, there is always someone out there that is better. The pros mechanics, as well as the coordination in the All-Star team competition, had made her a lot more modest. She was slowly discovering the difference between herself and a true expert. You can send some back into the water, Yi Shu replied. Ah, you're in the water? Tang Ru asked. Of course. Where? Not too far from you. Don't worry about me and just send them my way. Anyone that falls into the water will be mine, Yi Shu replied. Got it, Tang Ru closed the message. The 10 or so enemies had arrived and several players in the water were preparing to jump out. Tang Ru hadn't said anything yet, when Steamed Bun Invasion took the initiative and shouted, Kill. Concealed Light, follow your bro forward. Steamed Bun Invasion's loud voice had made the 10 or so players turn sluggish. They could bear with Soft Mist's yelling, but this Steamed Bun Invasion was a mere level 33 and that Summoner Concealed Light was only level 34. Where did these two brothers get such confidence? The 10 or so players looked around them, puzzled. They knew that the grove had a launcher hidden somewhere inside. Could there be more players hiding in the grove? Uh-oh. Could there be more waiting in ambush? Someone directly said. There's no retreat. Let's go forward first, another yelled. The group of 3 charged forward bravely. The 10 or so players continued to cautiously pay attention to the grove and any other place where players could hide in, afraid of an ambush. Pooh. Because they hadn't been focused on what was in front of them, one of the 10 players was smashed in the face by a brick from Steamed Bun Invasion. F***CK, I thought they were experts. Steamed Bun Invasion smacked a brick in one of their faces and then even looked down on them. F***CKER. The berserker that was hit by the brick immediately turned furious. He lifted his greatsword and crashed towards them with a collapsing mountain. Chapter 370, A Bit Too Few. Dodge. Tang Ru called as her Soft Mist rolled to the right. Steamed Bun Invasion wasn't slow, either. He rolled to the left and dodged it beautifully. F***CK, Comrade Concealed Light gave out a firm shout and was knocked to the ground by the collapsing mountain. The ground onshore was soft and immediately caved in to form the figure of a person. Concealed Light had been pressed into the ground by the greatsword. His arms and legs were still struggling. It wasn't as if he didn't want to dodge, but his fingers were too slow. He had probably only started moving when the attack hit him, so even though he was on the ground already, his hands and arms were still twitching. Ha 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 ha, you suck, Steamed Bun Invasion laughed out loud. He didn't move slowly, though, and immediately went up to rescue him, clawing towards the berserker's throat with a strangle. The berserker wasn't slow, either. He immediately jumped backwards in order to try and dodge, but just happened to leap into Soft Mist's attack range. Tang Ru had been prepared to attack. As soon as she saw that her enemy had delivered himself to her, she didn't even bother stepping forward to welcome him. She shot out a palm towards his back and falling flower palm blew him away. The berserker had just escaped from the lake, but he was now heading back. Ah! Why'd you hit him into the water? What do we do now? Steam Bun Invasion saw the berserker get sent flying and asked in regret. These words were like a gust of cold wind towards the 10 or so players. His voice didn't sound like he was bluffing. It sounded as if he was very confident in cleaning them up. Could it be that this Steam Bun Invasion is another pro-god? Someone suddenly raised a terrifying notion. This notion seemed rational and logical. If there was a Yi Chu and a Su Mucheng, why wouldn't there be another god? Everyone there had seen Steam Bun Invasion's name on the standings before. Even though a few of them had fought with him before, because of how eye-catching Lord Grimm was, his teammates would have been outshined to a certain extent. The guilds hadn't done too much research on Steam Bun yet. They only knew that he definitely wasn't weak. And now with Lord Grimm and Cleansing Mist's true identities exposed, Steam Bun Invasion. They were thinking about this from this perspective. I don't think so, someone said. Your reason, the name is too stupid, isn't it? What type of brawler expert has such a stupid-sounding name? These experienced players were familiar with the majority of brawlers in the pro scene. They didn't remember any weird names similar to Steam Bun Invasion. This group of players had been shaken by Steam Bun Invasion. During their moment of hesitation, Concealed Light had climbed back out and was mercilessly made fun of by Steam Bun Invasion. His words left Concealed Light speechless. You should just stay behind me and watch the show, Steam Bun Invasion shouted, making the 10 or so experts go blank. Just how strong was this guy? Let's try first. At worst, one of us dies. There was still one brave hero amidst the 10 or so players. He didn't think that they needed to be so scared. He shouted and then rushed forward. But he hadn't even closed in yet, when the team received a notification. Another person had left the team. What's going on? This brave hero froze in fear. He turned his head to look back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Everyone was still there. He then turned back to look at Steam Bun Invasion. Pooh! A brick smashed into his face. F***ck. The brick couldn't stop him from cursing out loud. The brick covering his mouth was only a visual effect. Steam Bun Invasion moved nimbly and quickly circled behind him. Kick him into the lake, Tang Ru shouted. Why? Steam Bun Invasion asked, but Steam Bun Invasion's biggest strength was that he would ask why, but he didn't need to finish hearing the explanation to perform the task. He asked, while comboing an uppercut into a knee attack to the back, sending the brave hero back into the water. There's a boss inside the water, Tang Ru replied calmly. Boss, then we should go and kill it, Steam Bun Invasion said excitedly. We can't. The boss is on the same team as us, Tang Ru said. Steam Bun Invasion was still confused, but their enemies already understood. They realized that Yi Chu and Su Mucheng were still hiding in the water beside them. There really is an ambush waiting, one of them yelled. They suddenly lost all will to fight, but how could Tang Ru and Steam Bun Invasion let them go? They rushed forward and attacked. A few of the players in the water had originally been hoping to wait for a good opportunity to go up onto land, but now they knew that danger had been all around them the entire time. They tried to hurry onto land as fast as they could, but then they heard something come out of the water. They turned their heads to see 2 hand grenades, one on their left and one on their right, arcing above their heads. The grenades landed in front of them and exploded. The waves pushed them into the boss's embrace. They tried to resist, but it was useless. Dozens of players had been helpless against Yi Chu in the water. What could the few of them do? The players onshore may have lost 2 players, but against Tang Ru's group, their numbers advantage was still obvious. However, once they knew that Yi Chu was nearby and seeing that the other side's plan was to send them into the water, these 10 or so players lost all hope. They no longer had any thoughts of fighting them. Their only thought was to run away. Once they started running, Tang Ru's group couldn't do anything because they had too few members. They could only do their best to chase. In order to save precious time, they didn't try and kill them and instead tried to toss them into the water. In terms of raw mechanics, these players couldn't compare to Tang Ru and Steam Bun Invasion. However, in terms of their familiarity with glory, they were far superior. Right now, they were completely defenseless, fearful of the god's presence. Tang Ru and Steam Bun Invasion tried their hardest, but had only been able to toss 5 of the players back into the water. Concealed Light had initially been extremely nervous facing all of these high-level players, but who would have thought that these guys wouldn't even fight back? It let even him show off his might. Concealed Light wanted to give out a good performance, but his skill level was truly too low. These experienced players simply reacted out of instinct, and Concealed Light was helpless against them. The players were already in complete disorder, though. They didn't even notice how bad this summoner was. We can't catch them. After tossing 5 into the water, the other 4 had already ran far away. Tang Ru could only regretfully report. It's not over until the very last moment. We shouldn't give up, Steam Bun Invasion said. Then you go chase them, Concealed Light mocked. His skills in battle were terrible, but his judgment was very good. It's the very last moment now. I declare, give up, Steam Bun Invasion solemnly said. Idiot, Concealed Light turned around to watch the water battle. F***CK, how can you talk to your senior like that? I don't want to talk to you anymore. I'll throw you into the waters to feed the boss, you hear? Steam Bun Invasion chased after him. The 3 stood together on the shoreside, but they could only see the rolling waves. The characters were underwater, so they couldn't see what was going on very clearly. From time to time, a player's head would come up, but from their observations, anyone whose head came up was dead. Up until now, 3 players had shown their heads. Everything under them was a cloud of white light. What type of boss is this? It's so strange, Steam Bun Invasion thought. Tang Ru was speechless. This brother still didn't understand what she had meant. He was still thinking it was an actual wild boss. Concealed Light, on the other hand, was enjoying Steam Bun Invasion's stupidity and didn't tell him that he was wrong. Careful, a huge wave suddenly rose up from the water. Inside the wave was a figure. Steam Bun Invasion shouted while jumping forward to protect the 2 of them. Against an unknown danger, Steam Bun Invasion stood firm. Tang Ru saw that the figure in the wave wasn't their ally, but by the time she realized this, Steam Bun Invasion had already moved. This was completely instinct. Tang Ru reckoned that Steam Bun Invasion hadn't seen clearly what had come out. If Yishu's Lord Grimm had jumped out, then that would be hilarious. Steam Bun Invasion's fingers were as precise as ever. He sent out a kick with an eagle stamp. With the double stamp, Steam Bun Invasion somersaulted back to shore. That brother had naturally been smashed back into the water by Steam Bun Invasion. As he fell, the 3 heard a F***CK your sister. The brother that fell back in was really bitter. They weren't their opponents in the water, and Yi Chu's and Su Mucheng's golden duo were extremely terrifying. The dozens of players couldn't contain them, but the duo had a very easy time containing them. They had already lost their will to fight long ago. They only wanted to run. They tried their hardest. 3 of them had died to give this player a chance to escape onto shore, but as soon as he got out of the water, the tips of his toes hadn't even touched the ground, when a little punk onshore had kicked him back in. Beautiful. In the water, Yishu's Lord Grimm showed his head, praising Steam Bun Invasion. However, amidst the roaring waves, although they could hear him, they couldn't see him. Huh? Did I hear Señor's voice? Steam Bun Invasion stared stupidly. Yeah, they're in the water. Ah, Señor is fighting the boss, Steam Bun Invasion cried out in astonishment. Tang Ru thought for a bit, but didn't say anything. She was afraid that she wouldn't be able to explain her analogy to Steam Bun Invasion to make him understand. I want to watch, Steam Bun Invasion shouted and jumped into the water, but not longer after, he came back and said to Tang Ru and Concealed Light, the boss is already dead. Señor is fighting with the ones who stole the boss. The water feels so weird. It was just like Señor said before. We can't really help him, so we'll just stand guard here. If anyone comes up, we'll send them back in. Steam Bun Invasion said and used an eagle stamp to demonstrate, wasting his cooldown. Me too, Tang Ru said and jumped into the water. She wanted to see what was so different about fighting in the water than on ground like Yi Shu had said. But she didn't even get the chance to sink deeper. The surface of the water split apart and Lord Grimm's and Sumucheng's heads came out. Done? Tang Ru's soft mist asked with half of her body in the water. Done, Yi Shu said. A bit too few, though.